Solwezi, we're here, louder, stronger, and everywhere. Solwezi, we are on 88.9 FM, Radio 4, where the music talks.
This is the update. Let's look at another important issue that borders on preserving the country's history, which is the archives, which hold records that are fundamental to the exercise of justice and the protection of rights. The ways in which these records are preserved, described, accessed, and governed directly influence how individuals and communities can pursue the truth, accountability, and justice. Zambia Archives and Records Management Association is joining us in studio through the president, Mr. Abel M'kulama, and also head of Department Library and Information Science, Mr. Sipho Banda. He is also the Secretary General of ZARMA. They join us to look at this important issue. I'd like to welcome you to the update.
Thank you so much.
Let me start with you, Mr. Banda, in looking at the archives and why they're so important to our society today.
Yes, so first of all, maybe I would like to talk about the association, if I may.
Yes.
So this is an association that was registered in 2021, and for the sole purpose of promoting the profession, records managers and archivists. And so when you look at archives, even at personal level, we keep records. You keep records, Chideshe, from your NRC, your qualifications. Is it a white book for your vehicle, and so on. And so these are basically documented evidence of what has happened before. And so it's incumbent on all of us basically to keep records in the most effective way possible. Yeah.
How important, Mr. M'kulama, is looking at the archives for a nation, for communities? Most of the time people say, but history is not really well documented, especially on the African continent. But this is your drive as an association.
Yeah, archives are very important. They, like you said, they're evidence of things that have happened in a society, in a nation, in an organization, right? Your time here at the Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation is going to be evidenced 20, 30 years from now by archives. We talk about the liberation struggle that Zambia went through 64 years ago. In 1964. Evidence is in archives and records. Now we've been talking decolonizing how we do things, decolonizing our curriculum. And why are we talking about those things? Because we've realized that the colonial masters changed how we lived, and the evidence of that is in the archives that we keep. Now, like he said, again, all of us keep records in one way or the other, and I'd like to bring it here home. ZNBC has one of the richest archival heritage in this country. From the inception of ZNBC's creation, they've kept a record of everything that they've recorded in the Zambian society. And we can easily go back to that archives to learn about who we are. So each institution creates a record on a daily basis, and those records become archives, and they're the evidences of who we are. Just a quick note, courts of law. If you go to the courts, almost all the evidence is based on what happened, and lawyers depend on records and archives, and justice sometimes can be denied or given depending on how accurate the records and archives have been kept.
I like that you two gentlemen bring it down closer to home, because I think there's no sector that doesn't have an archive, from the health sector, like you say, to issues of security. But let's look at how we can embrace more of this archive material, because if we're looking at libraries, many people will tell you they haven't been to a library. Do libraries still exist? Because of evolution, and that is also part of archiving. But how then do we create a more conducive environment where I should walk in and say, who are my ancestors? How is my lineage and all that?
Yeah, so there are a number of institutions that provide this information. For example, National Archives of Zambia has got very rich history, documented history, which is kept there, and all you need to pay is a minimal fee. So with this field, actually, it's a service that you can't really charge hefty amounts. And so at a minimum fee, you are able to access information as far back as the 1980s, okay, to find out what happened then. Even on a personal level, you would want to maybe find out what happened on your birthday, 50 years down the line, what happened on that specific day. And of course, departments like National Archives of Zambia would be able to provide newspapers that were collected at that day. Okay, so preservation is very important, and I think it's something that everyone should be interested in. Of course, even ZMBC, like he indicated, keeps a lot of information. Okay, inaugurations for past presidents as far back as President Kaunda, and so up to date, you have all this information, and so this is only because of the preservation that you have done. And so institutions generally have to pay attention to this field, have to pay attention to records themselves, provide an enabling environment to provide effective and efficient records management services.
Speaking from Mr. Banda's pronouncement and discussion, we want to look at the archive in relation to national development. Like you say, an inauguration that was there in 1964, children who were born in 2020, 2012 will be able to watch it through our platforms. But what would you say is the drive of national development when we look at knowledge and information that comes from the archives?
Great, thank you. I think you know that the country and the president has been pronouncing issues to do with Zambia becoming a knowledge economy, but also there's the issue of digital transformation that is taking place right now. There's one law that I'd like to actually speak to, the access to information law. I don't know if Zambians know about this. In 2023, the president enacted the access to information. What that law does is that it has given power to Zambians, you and I, to go to any ministry, any department that does business with government to request for any information and to use that information for decision making. We are going to elections this year. If I'm to make an informed decision, I should be able to read and know these things. Zambia can only develop if we really ensure that children have access to this information, citizens have access to this information, and one of the things he talked about, there's a minimum fee that National Archives charges, but most institutions don't charge. I come from the University of Zambia, and the University of Zambia Library has a special archive, we call it the special collections, free to the public because it serves as a national library. So if we are really to be a literate and developing country, we've got to be a reading country. We've got to read. I'm reminded of one statement, it's a Latin statement. It said verba volant, right? Scripta manent. A thing you say will eventually leave, will fly away. But that which you've written will remain. And now what we need to do as a people, we need to change and work on encouraging children to learn about the ZNBC archive, the National Archives. And not just a lot of us adults, actually. Some people don't even know where the National Archives is.
It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. And I'd like to continue the conversation, Mr. Banda, because I know that digitization can also make people think, does the archive still remain relevant? Are people in this space transitioning? How do we get the information? And Mr. M'kulama says something very important, because he says you write down, you pen down these issues, but nowadays people don't even want to use the pen and paper.
So digitization, very important as well. And so digitization helps to preserve the physical record, okay? But at some point you would have to go back to the written documents to prove its authenticity. And so with the coming of digital migration, it has also brought in other aspects of maybe changing certain things on record. For example, AI. You have to really consider the physical record for you to know that this digital record is actually authentic. Otherwise, you've seen Chile letters flying around social media claiming to be authentic when it's actually just a digital created document. And so it has to be, a hybrid for some time until you really transition fully into digital migration successfully.
And And there's nothing like reading a book or an archive document. But let's look at the activities. We know that this week is dedicated to the archives, but how are you putting on activities that will create awareness among the members of the public?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. A few things we've done. We're having webinars with students and people that are interested in archives. But also we are reaching out to people to come to the National Archives and research for themselves. But importantly, between the 23rd and the 26th of June, the Zambian Archives and Records Management Association is having a conference in Livingstone where archivists and records management professionals from around the country come together and talk about these particular issues. Since you talked about the theme and the activities, one of the critical things about this year's theme is that it's Archives for Justice. If you look at what's going on now, you know, the National Archives has some of the critical information on district archives. He can talk more on it. When chiefs disagree on some things, the National Archives is usually the answer to that, because they go to district archives, understand how those archives those districts were divided and things like that. So a major activity will happen after next week, where all archivists come together, and the PSMD will be our guest of honor to really talk about the changes that are happening in government. One critical change is digital transformation he's talking about. We have a digital transformation strategy now that government is implementing, and those issues will be talked about, and the challenges that records and archival professionals face in Zambia. There are challenges, they're doing good, but we've got to move forward and eventually reach the desired time where archives are available to everyone, workers such as archivists are happy, and the citizens are eventually happy.
It's really a good profession. Let's conclude by looking at how best we can continue to preserve archives. Why institutions should do that? Why institutions should even deliberately have libraries?
Yeah, so the reason why we should continue having archives is that, you see, 10 years down the line, when we're making certain decisions, the evidence should be there as to why we made those decisions. So based on the records that we have. And so if not, it means that we'll be giving information that is false, which is injustice to ourselves and to the society. And so when you tell a story that isn't based on facts, which are written down, that's a lie. And so this is why we need to preserve these records and have these archives supported. Yes.
It sounds like a great time that you will be having even as you head to Livingstone. Your final thought to the custodians of this information, because like you say, many people have this information, and also to the public in seeking this information, knowing where they're coming from, appreciating the history of the country.
I think my final thought is that archives, especially public archives, are a right that every Zambian has. So you and I, as Zambians, have a right to know what's happening in any ministry in this country, anchored by the access to information law. We should be able to access that, and we should know as Zambians, we have that right. And for archivists, we have a duty to perform to satisfy the desires of Zambians legally. I think I'll leave it there.
It's a great conversation, and I hope we can continue to speak about archives and its importance to our nation. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
That is the President, ZARMA, Abel M'kulama, as well as the Head of Department at Library and Information Science at UNZA, and we do know that there is motion in as far as what will be taking place from the 8th to the 12th of June. He was also joined by Sipho Banda, Secretary General, ZARMA, Chief Archivist, National Archives of Zambia. Do stay tuned.